Hey guys, it's History Behind the Warrior and welcome to another Mortal Kombat 11 video. Now in today's topic and discussion I will be making a tier list, I know right, super original, on every single character that's actually in Mortal Kombat 11. I'll be ranking each of these characters here from a lore-based perspective instead of that of what you typically see from a tournament-based one. So I will strictly be focusing on what exactly is going on with each individual character here and ranking them according to their somewhat power level, which is something that definitely does fluctuate in the Mortal Kombat universe. Now too, because apparently I super duper hate myself, not only will I be ranking every single character that features in Mortal Kombat 11, but I'll be ranking each different version of each character. As you see, due to two different timelines kind of clashing and merging together, we typically have about two different versions of one character. So that's what I mean when I say these timelines kind of mash together. It's really rather strange. Now I will say right out the gate, this is not at all a definitive tier list. This is simply going by my overall knowledge and understanding how the Mortal Kombat 11 story has been structured. I'll be ranking a lot of these characters here on not only their power level, but also their win-loss ratio in the game, as I believe that allows me to somewhat determine how strong they are and give us a rough idea of how this incarnation of said character ranks up in comparison to the rest of the other characters in the game, because there's a lot of power levels in this game that do fluctuate pretty damn hard, and in some cases make sense and in some cases don't make sense. So I'll be trying to make sense out of the entire story mode and ranking each character according to what I believe they deserve to be. So without any further ado, let's get right on to it. As you see, I have made a tier list with all the characters that are in the story mode. There's most likely one I'm forgetting, so feel free to, let me know down in the comments below. But this is basically every character I can remember that's in the story mode off the top of my head. Again, I guarantee there's one character I'm missing. But first off, let's start from the top left and just work our way through. Now first off, let's actually talk about Dark Raiden for a second, as he's a pretty interesting topic. And of course, I'm actually going to put him pretty high up at A tier. Now the reason why I'm saying that is because Raiden right out the gate wields God status. He's basically an elemental and he is extremely strong because of that. Now the reason why he's ranked pretty damn high on this list is because at the very beginning of the story mode in the very first chapter, we not only see that, he is in his corrupted form, but he is also wielding Shinnok's amulet. Now for those of you who aren't too familiar with Shinnok's amulet, or MK for MKX for that matter, Shinnok's amulet is an extremely powerful item that actually enhances the powers of whoever wields it. This has included the likes of Onaga, Quan Chi, and now of course Raiden. So this does somewhat amplify his godlike powers to most likely Elder God status. So I believe because of that, it does give him an edge over a majority of other characters in the game. It's just the fact that the Amulet of Shinnok gives him a massive big power boost. However, despite this, he is not a true Elder God or a Titan for that matter, hence why he's not actually an S tier right now. However, we cannot diminish how strong he actually is in game. So because of his godlike status and the Amulet of Shinnok, it does rank him pretty far up on here. Now this one's going to be pretty easy for me. I'm going to take old Sonya Blade and rank her in probably mid-C tier. Despite this character being an absolute pain in the ass to deal with from a gaming competitive standpoint, the old Sonya we do see in Mortal Kombat 11 is pretty damn old to her younger counterpart that we later see. Now we don't see too much of her, which is why she's actually ranked pretty damn low, but on top of this, she does fight her daughter Cassie and she does lose to her. So because of her loss, I am ranking her rather low. Now another reason why I'm actually doing this is because MKX was very clear proof that this kind of game was a coming of age game. It introduced to us a new generation of characters as the older ones were, getting far older. So because of that, I'm actually ranking old Sonya pretty like mid-C tier. 1, she isn't too relevant to the story. 2, she lost to her daughter. 3, she does perish. And 4, her younger counterpart is most likely far stronger than she is because, well, she is younger. So for now, I'm going to keep Sonya at middle C tier. Now this is actually a fun one. I will be moving old Johnny Cage up to B tier. Now the reason why I'm actually ranking like Johnny pretty damn high up in this list here is because 1, he is a very skilled fighter in his own right. He's been through a fair amount since MK9 onwards, but what I believe helps give him the edge over another character like old Sonya for example is the fact that he wields the green energy. Now he is fairly old and he doesn't get in touch with the power as well as he used to, as kind of been hinted through the story mode. Now under the right circumstances, this power will enable him to take down an Elder God. Now, what I also believe has actually helped Johnny Cage as a character is actually his relationship with Sonya, as weird as that might sound. You see, when Johnny was first introduced to us back in MK9, he was this brash and arrogant, egotistical, stuck-up actor with his head up his own arse. However, after getting with Sonya, he kind of like humbled himself out a little bit and allowed him to become a better person and a better father. So I believe because of that, it does help him out a fair bit here as a character. And during the MK11 story, we do see him beat up his younger counterpart. So it's very clear here that over the course of time, he's become a much better fighter, despite being pretty old in comparison. Now, the reason why he doesn't rank up with A tier here is because he is rather old, and a majority of the A tier characters do have like god-slaying capabilities. Not that Johnny Cage can't be up there, because he could actually make lower A tier. The only reason he doesn't is because he is quite old. And since we are talking about green energy, let's actually talk about our next character here. None other than the daughter of Sonya Blade and Johnny Cage, that being Cassie. Now, I will rank Cassie mid-lower A tier. She is a very good character, but again, much like Johnny Cage, her powers are somewhat situational. She's definitely far more on tap with it than Johnny is, I believe. But again, this power is more designed to fight deities than it is other fighters. If she's fighting other individuals, then it's an even playing field. If she's fighting someone like Raiden or Cetrion, it's definitely far more in her favor. Call it a bit of existing plot armor, but it's simply how green energy has been designed. Now, Cassie is still a pretty damn young member of the Special Forces. She's still extremely young and has reached a lot of high accolades, even alongside her peers. So I believe because of that, it kind of gives her the edge over Johnny. That and the fact that, again, she is very young. Plus, remember what I did say about A tier. These are individuals that do have god-slaying capabilities. And seeing as not only did Cassie defeat Shinnok, but a like souped up, corrupted version of the god, I really do think she does deserve a spot up on this list, even if it's at like the middle / lower part of the A tier list. But that's where I'm going to leave Cassie for now. Now, this is a character that probably is going to get a lot of mixed reception from people, but do hear me out. I'll be taking Revenant Liu Kang, and I'm actually going to put him at the middle kind of higher end of the B tier list. Now, before you cut my head off, do hear me out. Out of all the Revenants, Revenant Liu Kang is clearly the strongest of the bunch. I mean, in MK9, out of all of the Earthrealm defenders, he was the one that defeated Shang Tsung and slew Shao Kahn. So naturally, I'm going to rank him fairly high on this list. The only reason he does not cut into A tier is because he's a Revenant. And the one thing that MK11 really does somewhat enforce in the story mode is that the Revenant incarnations of the characters are far weaker than the human incarnation of the character. We see this time and time again in a lot of mirror matches, like the one with Jade, like the one with Kung Lao, and like the one with Liu Kang. They are weaker in comparison to their human counterparts. So that's the only reason why he kind of sits in the middle of the tier list right now. He's still an exceptionally strong character, but it is very clear that it is a downgrade from his MK9 counterpart. Even in the story, after he somewhat absorbs his MK9 counterpart, I would still at most put him at lower A tier, as he is defeated by a normal Raiden. But I'll be talking about that in a bit as to why I think that's the case. But for now, I'm going to keep Revenant Liu Kang here. Don't worry, we still have 2 more Liu Kangs to talk about that actually rank far higher than him, so please don't lose your mind. Now, let's talk about his girlfriend, Revenant Katana, who I'm going to stick right next to him. Now, I believe that Revenant Katana isn't as strong as Revenant Liu Kang, mostly because, you know, Liu Kang's Liu Kang. But unfortunately, Katana herself in the story mode doesn't actually get a lot of limelight on her. She only features every here and there, and unfortunately, she does lose on every single occasion. She is a bad guy character, so she's naturally going to lose because of it. And 2, she doesn't feature in the story all that much. So because of that, I cannot, in my mind, put her up any higher than this, but she isn't a weak character at all. Plus, before I absolutely do forget, remember at the end of the MK11 story mode, she does get empowered by Kronecker's Hourglass of Time. So there is a boost in her power level, but it's not significant enough to give her the edge to defeat someone like Fire God Liu Kang, who is easily able to defeat pretty much anyone in his way. So I'm going to leave Katana at somewhat B tier for the time being, but she's not at all really a bad character. She's actually pretty damn strong. It's just a shame that, you know, because of her bad guy-esque role, she's somewhat shackled into the jobber jobber-esque role. Now let's talk about our next character, and it's none other than the mix-up monster known as Jackie Briggs. Now Jackie, much like Cassie, is a coming-of-age character. She's part of a new generation, so she definitely is a spring chicken in comparison to the characters that stayed alive after MK9. Now due to her father's accolades, Jackie had a lot to kind of live up to, and unfortunately these expectations are extremely high, so she constantly does have to push herself. But despite this, Jackie suffers from a few issues here as a character. You see, in her chapter she fights against Noob Saibot and Jade and does defeat them, which is great accolades to have. However, I do want everyone to take into mind that Revenants tend to be weaker than their human incarnations. And on top of this, Jackie doesn't have anything that kind of breaks the mold or makes her too spectacular. Like, everyone kind of has their own magical kind of shtick that gives them the edge over someone else. Takeda, he was personally trained by Scorpion and has telekinetic capabilities, as well as, you know, him being telepathic. Cassie has green god-killing energy. Kung Jin is a member of the Shaolin family and a cousin to Kung Lao, so that bloodline is pretty much drenched in experience. And then there's Jackie, who kind of feels like the oddball out of the bunch. Now that's not necessarily her fault, it's just that this character hasn't been given enough growth outside of what we see in game, and unfortunately because of that I can't rank her any higher than mid B tier. Now let's get onto a character that I really don't want to put here, but it makes sense for him to be here, and that means I'll be taking Revenant Cabal, and I will be putting him as a first character in D tier. Now Cabal as an overall character, really cool, really awesome, fantastic. Just, I love his overall package, and I especially love his Revenant design. However, Cabal in MK11 has not been treated great. Now naturally, because he is a Revenant, he is weaker than his human counterpart, but the reason why I ranked him down on D tier here is because this character is just basically not used in the story mode. He's barely touched at all. He just unfortunately exists and is the somewhat epitome of the jobber-esque role. He has some fantastic scenes in chapter 1 of the game, but that's basically all we see of him. After he's defeated by Cassie and the Netherrealm Citadel does crumble, he just pretty much disappears after that. So I believe it's a rather safe assumption to make that he probably perished in this fight, but I'm not entirely too sure about that, but that's basically the main reason why he's actually a D tier here. If you were to remove Revenant Cabal's inclusion in the story, everything would actually be the same. And unfortunately, that's a shame because I am actually a massive fan of Cabal. So it sucks that I have to put him at D tier here. But anyway, let's get on to our next character. Now, it seems like we can't get away from any of the Revenant characters because I will in fact be ranking Jade now. Now Revenant Jade is a very weird one, and you know what, I will in fact be placing her right next to Katana, so she will be above Jackie, but I will explain that in a bit, because in chapter 1 of the game, although it's not seen, it is insinuated that Jackie was able to defeat Jade. Despite her losses, she still is a pretty powerful adversary. However, once again, what stops her from kind of peeking out a little bit further is the fact that she is Revenant in nature, so she definitely isn't as strong as her human counterpart, who was successful in defeating her. Now the reason why she's sitting at middle B tier here is because she is infused by the end of the story with Kronecker's Hourglass of Time. So because of that, I will be sitting her dead center here. She's not a bad character at all despite her jobber-esque role, but her power buff does definitely do something for her as a character. So it's not all bad for Jade as a character. Now as we're moving on, let's actually talk about our first proper S tier of the list, and that's none other than Kronecker. Now I'm sticking her right up here at S tier because there's a variety of reasons why she's here. She's the big bad of the game. She's the first Titan we're seeing in the series. Now for those of you who don't know who Titans are, they are basically the parents of the Elder Gods, or more so the predecessors of them. Now unlike the gods or Elder Gods which like control elements, Titans seemingly have the ability to control the natural course of life, and Kronecker is one of these said deities, being one that controls time. So because of her role in the universe as well as her powers and capabilities, I will be putting her as the first S tier character on the list. She's extremely strong and she's extremely powerful, but what slightly does take her down a tad bit of a notch here is the fact that during 11 story mode, she needed to get that very weird looking helmet in order to like rewrite time. So because she needed that like power boost, I can't really put her at the very like peak top of S tier because there's another character that I believe that kind of topples her. It should be fairly obvious if you have played the story mode, but for those of you who haven't, I won't mention it just yet. Now it seems like we're going to shoot straight back down the tier list to the very bottom because I have the Collector. So yes, Collector is going to be at the very bottom of the tier list, unfortunately. Despite his kind of cool goblin-esque design. The character doesn't really serve a proper role in the story. He plays a jobber-esque role, and if you were to remove him from the story, absolutely nothing at all would change. So it's hard for me to like really enjoy and appreciate the character when he has nothing to work with. Every fight he has in the story he does lose, and despite his very small appearances being really cool, his win-loss ratio kind of hurts his credibility as a character, especially when you take into account that 11 is his debut game. So because of these reasons alone, I'm going to keep Collector at the very bottom, because there's not really a lot to work with the character. He's just been written into the role he has, so I'm going to keep him here. Now let's talk about a character that I'm very mixed on, because I like him a lot, and I feel like everyone likes him a lot, but he's kind of treated like garbage, and that is none other than Kotal Kahn, who I will in fact be sitting at the very end of B tier. Now Kotal in idea and concept is a really cool, awesome looking character. However, he has not really got a lot of credibility under his belt because of the role he does play. Being the Khan of Outworld, it naturally puts him in the crosshairs of many other characters. So when you do inevitably clash with said character, then they kind of lose their credibility when they have to get beaten up. So that's why I'm stacking Kotal at the lower end of B tier, because I believe he actually has an edge over a few of the characters that are above him here, but with how he's written, like, it fluctuates and it changes, and it makes him so hard to kind of pinpoint here on this list. His power level does fluctuate pretty much from the end half of the B tier list up to what I believe is the lower half of the A tier list, but because he's written in that way, it's very hard for me to kind of like pinpoint where he is. So to make things somewhat accurate, I'm gonna stick him at the lower end of B tier. It's just very hard to pinpoint where he is right now. Plus, with his current condition of him being handicapped by the end of the MK11 story, I don't really know what else they're gonna be doing with the character. It doesn't seem like they're gonna be doing much, especially with him like handing over the reins to Katana, who is now going to be one of the people that forge a new timeline. It's really kind of weird and somewhat, I wouldn't say convoluted. It's just that we don't really know what's going on with Kotal, and I feel like the writers kind of put themselves in a box where even they didn't really know like what to do with this character up to a certain extent. So because of that, I will be leaving Kotal at the end of B tier. But as I mentioned, his power level somewhat fluctuates all the way up to the very bottom of A tier. It's really weird. Now we have Youngjae, and honestly, I'm gonna put him at lower B tier. I'm going to put him just under Jackie because I believe she's actually a bit younger than Jax, but I will be putting him above Kotal because at least Jax's power level is consistent. Now, despite this version of Jax recently having his arms blown off, he's far more optimistic than his current timeline counterpart, and I believe due to the fact that he's younger and the mental fortitude he does have, it gives him an edge over his younger timeline counterpart, who he is successful in defeating. On top of this, he was able to defeat the likes of Jade and Noob Saibot, but to somewhat cap it off, and I forgot to mention this in the Jackie part, is that either Jackie or Jax is able to defeat Cetrion, who does hold the Elder God status role. Now, this is a pretty incredible feat in itself, but again, the only reason they were able to actually do that is under the set circumstances they had, where they were wearing Kronecker's weird crown helmet thing. So that's why I'm actually putting him at the lower end of B tier. He's not at all a bad character. He's pretty damn strong as he ranks up against a lot of the older age characters. It's just that, like, much like Jackie, we do not see a lot from him in the story mode. So for now, I'm going to leave him at the lower end of B tier. Sorry about that cut, guys. My neighbor was blasting out music and I wasn't. Anyway, back to it. I believe we had just ranked Jax. So let's actually rank the young version of Johnny Cage we do have here. Yes, I picked probably the perfect photo to describe him. This is the version of Johnny Cage that is egotistical, he's stuck up, and he still is riding the success he had back in Hollywood. So due to his somewhat egotistical nature, and the fact he's definitely far less disciplined than his MK11 counterpart, or MKX counterpart for that reason, I will be ranking him at lower B tier, just under Jax but above Kotal. Now the reason why he's actually here as well, and not higher up with his older counterpart, is because he is still extremely self-absorbed, but he's still unaware of the potential the green energy does have. You see, the events of MKX where he's truly able to tap into it haven't yet occurred. So because of him somewhat being unaware of his god-slaying potential, I will be putting him at the lower end of the B tier list. Again, he's an absolutely hilarious character, but that god killer energy is really something. Now our next character is in fact young Sonya, and due to her being at the similar age of Cassie, I will be putting her at the higher end of the B tier list, just under Liu Kang but above Katana. Now the reason why I say that is because she is a very capable fighter and has some amazing feats in the story mode. When she's captured and brought to the Black Dragon Fighting Club, she's able to defeat the likes of Eren Black, an assassin, and of course the Cybernetic Cabal. And even with the lack of her own utility and weapons, she is still able to defeat them. So although she may be unarmed, it doesn't make her any less dangerous. So personally, I do believe that this does work to her advantage here, and she is a very strong character because of this. And to somewhat solidify her placement on this list here, she is one of the very few characters in MK11 that does kill another character. That of course being Kano when she fires a bullet through his face. But that's the main reason as to why Sonya is so high up on this list here. She performs some amazing feats in the story mode, and she's definitely able to hold her own against experienced fighters despite lacking her own utility. Now our next character is actually someone who I really like, but unfortunately she's going to sit at the very middle of the B tier list, and that is sadly Scarlett. Now Scarlett, as expected, has unfortunately been given the Jobber-esque role, so she has been put in the game sadly to be beaten up. However, whenever she is on screen, she does steal it with her performance. But despite this, again, she has been written as a bad guy, and thus because of that, she gets absolutely no wins in the story mode. Despite her great and amazing scene where she's seemingly draining the blood out of Jade's face, she's not really doing much in the story that can actually propel her into B tier. Trust me, I love Scarlett and I think she's a lot of fun, but I don't feel like she'll actually be up higher on the tier list despite her ability to manipulate blood. And that may also be due to the slight nerf she has taken lore-wise. For those of you who are unaware, there has been some slight changes to her origin story. Back in MK9, she was introduced as someone who was created by Shang Tsung in his flesh pits for Shao Kahn. However, in MK11, that has been changed, as it seems like she was an orphan taken in by Shao Kahn and was taught blood magic by him. So I believe the slight change to her origin story is a nerf to what she had, because in her origin story, she had the ability to manipulate anyone that had blood flowing through them, whereas now it seems like she can just manipulate blood to her will. So because of that, I will not be ranking her any higher than C here, despite me basically adoring the character. Well, it's another character I like, but he's gonna rank pretty damn low too, and that is young Eren Black. I'll be putting him at middle C tier 2, just above Sonya, but Eren Black has always suffered from the kind of like cool character aesthetic that gets treated like a punch bag. Now in 11, his younger counterpart does play an extremely villainous role, so it's absolutely expected that that character will be playing said role of jobber. Despite his overall amazing design, he gets absolutely no wins under his belt, and is also defeated by a disarmed Sonya. So as expected, he kind of fits into the C tier list pretty damn well, because it just seems like Eren Black is a character that suffers from a form of writing where he's just the bad guy that gets continuously beaten up. But yeah, that's where I'm gonna leave him for now, because I would actually talk more about him, but there's not a lot of material to work with Eren Black here. Now we have everyone's absolute overkill monster, and that is none other than Baraka. Now a lot of things I did say about Scarlett and Eren Black can actually apply to Baraka here, but I will be actually putting him above Scarlett in this instance. Now the reason why I say that is because MK11 is the first time that we've actually seen Baraka do something outside of be a mindless minion, and that is where he joins forces with Katana. You see, outside of this, Baraka has basically been given no character development in the story. He's never actually been given the opportunity to think for himself. So seeing him actually take these steps to become a better character, because Baraka has always been a very cool character in concept. In terms of design, he's sheer overkill, but it's pretty cool looking overkill, and I believe that gives him the edge over some of the other characters here. However, in saying that, he does pretty much lose every single fight in the story and does get his ass handed to him. So I cannot put him in the B tier list because he doesn't really get that many wins under his belt. But I am most definitely quite happy with what they did with his character in this game. Looks like we're going to shoot right back up to the middle of the A tier list with none other than Liu Kang. Now there was no doubt that this version of Liu Kang was going to be in the A tier list. This is the iteration of the character that had defeated Shang Tsung and was going to destroy Shao Kahn. Not destroy, but more so put a massive fist through his chest. Either way, I think you kind of get my point here. This version of Liu Kang is extremely strong and of course is not a Revenant. So at least in that instance, he does have somewhat god-slaying capabilities. Now the reason why I'm putting him above Cassie and underneath Dark Raiden is because Cassie's green powers are much like I said, situation. They only really benefit her when she's fighting fighting a powerful deity, whereas Liu Kang's powers on the other hand are far more consistent. Being able to consistently treat every single opponent the same way in every fight allows Liu Kang to land very high up on the tier list here. And I mean, it's Liu Kang, although he's not the poster boy of the series, he's definitely the big hero of it, especially with MK11's final chapter. So yes, without a doubt, Liu Kang ranks up extremely high here. Now, let's talk about his girlfriend Katana. Now, human Katana in this game is a very interesting beast. Although she doesn't play a massive integral role to the story mode, she does have some pretty incredible feats when it comes to somewhat uniting outwards people. And even Kotal recognizes how strong she is and gives her the position of calm. So because of this, it somewhat does elevate her from more of a lore-based perspective. In terms of power levels, however, it's quite hard to somewhat pinpoint. So I'm going to put her at the higher end of the B tier list, as she does win a majority of her fights and does defeat Shao Kahn, but it doesn't put her in A tier because I don't feel like we see enough from her that gives her the option to kind of float in that area. So I will be placing human Katana at the higher end of the B tier list. Now let's actually talk about Youngjae. Now Jade is a very strange and somewhat interesting character in this scenario. She's a great hand-to-hand combatant and is the bodyguard of Katana and is an assassin of Shao Kahn. So she is naturally very capable when it comes to hand-to-hand fighting. However, we do not see too much of it in 11's story mode. But from what we are aware, as expected, she's able to defeat her Revenant counterpart, as well as beat in the face of the character slayer Devorah. Now what makes her extremely hard to pinpoint is that a majority of the characters she does fight here rank rather low in the tier list. So because of that, I'm going to stick her in like middle B tier here, and I think I'm just going to stick her above Revenant Katana here, because I feel like she doesn't get enough exposure for what she does, and she lands herself in a pretty stupid situation where she beats up her boyfriend Kotal Kahn and the pair are captured. So for the time being, I'm definitely going to sit her at B tier, but she's definitely no slouch when it comes to being a fighter. I just wished we did see a bit more from her. Now let's talk about another A tier character, and that is none other than Raiden. Now this is of course MK9 incarnation of the character, not Dark Raiden that I mentioned at the very beginning. So because of that, I will be placing him above Liu Kang but under Dark Raiden. Now the reason why I place him over Liu Kang here is because there's a really weird kind of like situation I happen to find in the MK universe. Think of it as somewhat rock, paper, scissors. You see, we're constantly told in 11's story that Raiden's capable of killing Liu Kang, so that would technically make him the strongest fighter. However, historically, whenever we've ever seen Raiden fight Shao Kahn, he's always defeated by the Emperor. You see, we're in this really weird situation where it seems like Liu Kang is capable of defeating Shao Kahn, but Shao Kahn is capable of defeating Raiden, but Raiden's capable of defeating Liu Kang. Did you get that? Good, because it's really strange. Plus, I will actually say he is somewhat stronger than Liu Kang, because historically when they have fought, Raiden has definitely come out on top. And I believe that's more so because he's the somewhat Achilles heel to what Liu Kang's capable of. I feel like in this case, it's the situation of this fighting style counters this fighting style, and I feel like that somewhat makes more sense than trying to like juggle all three power levels that constantly fluctuate and change from game to game. I feel like that's how they've strictly been written. So as such, I will somewhat abide by their strange laws, but I do feel like the way that Raiden has been written in MK11 is what kind of gives him the edge over this incarnation of Liu Kang. Anyway, let's get on to our next character, and that is none other than Kung Lao. Now this is yet again another character that somewhat lacks exposure in the story, despite being a really cool character and having a lot of credibility under his belt. I feel like Kung Lao ranks in the upper half of the B tier list, just above Jade. Now the reason why he's under Sonyae here is definitely due to the lack of feats we actually see him perform in game. But I feel like this is a really good example of him sitting in the dead center between characters that have amazing capabilities, but are also somewhat undeveloped in the story mode. So I do feel like this is a pretty damn good placement for Kung Lao, because he's definitely nowhere near as strong as Liu Kang in the new timeline in lore. He's definitely no pushover. God, there are so many characters and I'm losing my voice. Now apparently we're also onto Revenant Kung Lao. I'm going to stick him at like the lower end of B tier here. I feel like he sits well just above the young Johnny Cage, but under young Jax. Now again, Revenant forms are far weaker than their human counterparts, but Revenant Kung Lao, whenever we do see him, is defeated on every single occasion, even despite his buff from Kronecker's Hourglass. So I believe it puts him at the lower end of B, but again, you can't really discredit anyone that's actually in B, as they all have amazing fighting capabilities, but do lack that edge that kind kind of allows him to shoot up to A tier. So really, a majority of stuff I did say for human Kung Lao can actually be applied to Revenant Kung Lao here. Plus, on top of that, unlike human Kung Lao, he doesn't really have a great win-loss ratio. So I feel like lower B definitely works the best for him. Now we can talk about Scorpion, and I will in fact be putting him at the lower end of the B tier list. I feel like it works out with him actually being above Revenant Kung Lao here, because unlike the Revenants that we did have during the end half of MK9, Scorpion does somewhat retain a lot of his humanity in MK9. I think he's far more human than a lot of people give him credit for. There's in fact a lot of sorrow in the character. However, much like a majority of the lower half of the B tier list, Scorpion does not have a great win-loss ratio in MK9 as well as MK11. As for the most part, he is a punching bag until he does redeem himself, of which he's then able to somehow defeat Sub-Zero and Raiden. So now I'm really considering his placement on the tier list. You know what? To somewhat even things out, I'm actually going to move him up a bit. I'm actually going to move him to probably middle B tier. So he's just under Katana and just above Jade. Because he does have those 2 wins under his belt, but it is during the later half of the story, and he hasn't been buffed by Kronecker's magic. I don't know, it's really hard for me to somewhat place him somewhere here. Because we all know that Scorpion is quite a strong character, but it does somewhat fluctuate from chapter to chapter. So he's somewhat a nerfed down version of the situation we have with Kotal. I feel like I'm going to keep him in middle B for now, but he's definitely weaker than his human counterpart who is capable of defeating him, as we did see that in the story. And whilst we're talking about that, I'm going to take our next character, Hanzo Hasashi. I'm going to place him at the upper end of B. The only reason he died in the story mode is because he was caught off guard trying to consult with his Revenant counterpart. That and the fact that Devorah pretty much seemingly has killed everyone's favourite character ability on all the time. But basically, outside of that, everything that I said with Scorpion can actually apply to Hanzo Hasashi. That and much more, because the MKX comic book series really did help Hanzo as a character. It smoothed out all the edges and he became a far better character because of it. So it kind of sucks as to the fact that they actually did end up killing him off. It's a decision that I'm not particularly too happy about, but unfortunately it is what it is at the end of the day. But his amazing feats of strength as a character really do give him an edge over his Revenant counterpart, as well as many of the other characters here. Plus, I mean, it's Scorpion, of course he's the poster boy, he's going to rank up fairly high here. Now moving on to our next character, let's talk about a rival of his, Sub-Zero. Honestly, if I could have it, I would have the pair be on par with each other. Now despite Sub-Zero and Hanzo Hasashi actually being extremely old, it seems like the pair of them have worked like fine wine. They've aged extremely well over the course of time, and I believe they've actually become stronger because of it. With Hanzo being able to redeem his clan, and Sub-Zero being somewhat able to reinvigorate some form of life back into the Lin Kuei, especially after the Cyber Initiative was a huge issue in MK9. Now in terms of story, Sub-Zero is basically able to defeat everyone in his way except for Revenant Scorpion, which as I mentioned at that part of this video, is kind of weird and strange. But despite this, he does have a pretty damn clean record. He's able to destroy the Cyber Initiative once again, and he continues to prove why he's one of the best well-rounded characters in Mortal Kombat lore. So I feel like he does fit up extremely well at the higher end of the B tier list here. Now we're onto a bit of a wild card on this, and that is actually Garris. Now Garris is extremely hard to actually place in this tier list here. I can't actually analyze his power level. If there was ever a character in literature I could actually compare him to, it's probably Doomsday from the DC comic book universe, because with every death Garris grows stronger and he cannot truly remain dead. So he is an immortal that can die, but he can become stronger with each different rebirth. So his power level like fluctuates all across the board here. But to get a somewhat accurate depiction of the character, I'm actually going to put him just above Sonya on the tier list here, as she is capable of defeating him, but he's a very hard character to somewhat pinpoint on the tier list. Because honestly, by the end of the story, I think he's middle A tier, because he is able to go up against Raiden and pretty much throw him on the ropes. So for now, I'm going to say at his weakest, Garris is middle B tier. At his strongest, it's very clear that it's definitely A tier. Now, let's actually talk about Ketchup and Mustard, or Cyrax and Sector depending on how you want to say it. Now these two characters aren't actually playable in the story mode, but do have existing movesets, so if you are playing on PC you can actually try them out. Now in saying that, let's actually rank the pair of them, and since Sector has a reputation for usually being stronger than Cyrax, I'm actually going to put him above Baraka here, and I'm going to put Sector just above Scarlett. On my opinion, they would actually be on par with each other. Now as I mentioned, historically Sector usually had the edge over Cyrax, and was the individual that kind of got him into the Cyber Initiative against his will. So because of that, I will be putting Sector above Cyrax. Now Cyrax is only there for one chapter, so I feel like middle C tier really does work for him, and Sector is only there for 2, as he does blow himself up. So I feel like these placements are somewhat fitting for the pair of these characters, as unfortunately they are underdeveloped despite being really cool. Now our next character is the Cybernetic Frost. Now much like her other cyborg counterparts, I will be putting her at the upper part of the C tier list, as I feel like she's the very peak of it. Unlike Sector and Cyrax, who are only around for a few chapters, Frost does make it to the very end of the game. However, her win-loss ratio is pretty damn atrocious. Now despite her interesting reintroduction to the universe, she does lose against everyone she goes up against, and is, from what I can presume, is most likely dead by the end of the story. Although it's not explicit, it is somewhat implied. So despite the great scenes she does feature in, her somewhat lack of character development and win-loss ratio is what does leave her at the very end of the C tier list. She's definitely able to contend with a lot of the B tier list players, but whether or not she's able to defeat them is a question in itself. And it seems like despite her cybernetic augmentations, it hasn't really given her the edge against the opposition. So I do feel like this right here is the perfect placement for the character. Now our next character is unfortunately another character that is going to slip into the C tier list, and that is none other than Noob Saibot. Now despite his long-awaited return, Noob Saibot has always been a character that has unfortunately been a bad guy, so he as such has filled that role, and to be fair, he's done a pretty damn good job of doing it. He's a very intimidating foe when it comes to his appearance, and is tied down pretty damn well to the lore, as of course Noob Saibot was the first Sub-Zero. But in saying that, he is a Revenant, so he would naturally be weaker than his human counterpart. Now in saying that, Kuai Liang was able to break away from these shackles and become what I believe is a far better Sub-Zero than his brother. And to somewhat solidify this point, you are given the option of defeating him with Kuai Liang or Hanzo Hasashi. And later on in the story mode, he is defeated by Jackie and Jax. So these are all characters that exist in the B tier list. So I believe because of his win-loss ratio, I'll be putting him just under Baraka here, because his inclusion is great and it's nice to see him return, but unfortunately he fills the bad guy role to what it is. Now we're up to Kano bros. Now honestly, I do feel like there's no actual difference between old Kano and young Kano. Despite his charismatic attitude and the fact that he pretty much steals the screen every time he's on, his win-loss ratio in games are usually terrible. Again, bad guy role and jobber-esque role. However, he is a lovable character to have in game, and that is the villain you love to hate. So I believe due to the fact that he's somewhat kind of integral to the story, I will be putting him at the upper half of the C tier list, just under Frost and just above Sector, I feel, because they do linger around a bit longer than Sector. But of course that win-loss ratio is what keeps them down in C. Now our next character is Jackson Briggs, or more so Old Man Jax. Now this version of Jax is definitely washed up in comparison to his younger timeline counterpart, and I believe due to his time as a Revenant and the death of his wife Vera has really taken a toll on his mental state, which has affected him physically. So because of that, I'm actually going to put him in upper C tier above Kano, because at no point in time in the story mode is he actually playable, whereas his younger counterpart actually remains in B tier. I believe he is the perfect antithesis of what PTSD can do to someone, but overall, to just kind of summarize Old Man Jax, his win-loss ratio not particularly too great. He's definitely weaker than his young timeline counterparts. He's actually a character that if you were to remove from the story mode, the story would actually be the exact same. So ultimately, I believe his main inclusion into the story was to create some form of conflict and drama for Jackie, which actually does make sense because Jackie doesn't have a lot to work with as a character. Now we can actually move on to a character that I feel like is very controversial, and that is none other than Devorah. Now I will be putting Devorah at the lower end of the B tier list here, because she is actually kind of important to the main story, at least in the sense of, hey, I kill everyone you love, hate me. But yes, no, that seems to be like Devorah's main gist in the story mode. She is a character you are supposed to hate, and she does actually fill that role extremely damn well. But despite this, she's one of the very few characters on this list here that has been successful in killing someone. First one's Baraka, second one's Melina, and first one is Hanzo Hasashi. That is a feat that no one in the universe has managed to acquire. So I do believe that she belongs in the B tier list, but she does get her ass kicked a fair bit. So that's what I believe puts her at the lower end of B here. Her win-loss ratio keeps her down, but her ability to scumbaggingly kill fan favorites is what puts her in B here, as it definitely makes her a very dangerous threat. Now it seems like the remaining characters here are actually going to be A tier caliber. But yes, let's talk about Cetrion, who is going to be the very peak of A tier. Now the reason should be obvious for why Cetrion's pretty high on A tier here. Despite her win-loss ratio being pretty ass, she only lost under particular circumstances. I believe and know she would have absolutely eviscerated Jax and Jackie if they did not have Kronecker's helmets, and she did lose to Fire God Liu Kang, and there is absolutely no shame in losing a fight to Liu Kang, because he's an extremely strong character. However, her Elder God status puts her above Dark Raiden. Unlike Dark Raiden, who has to use an amulet to acquire somewhat Elder God status, Cetrion is an Elder God through and through, and the daughter of Kronecker, a titan and a being of time. Cetrion herself is a god of many different elements, whilst Raiden only controls the one. And unlike some of the other characters on this list here, she's the only individual that has been successful in killing another Elder God. So this is what helps make her so incredibly dangerous. And it's why I placed her pretty damn high up on this list here. Now whilst I do think a character like Cassie can challenge her position, it's very clear here that Cetrion, in comparison to her brother Shinnok, is far stronger. So that's why she's at the very peak of the A tier list here. She's unfortunately extremely underdeveloped for being an Elder God, but we cannot deny the position she does have, as well as the power she does wield. So that is what puts her at the very top of A here. Now we come up to Shao Kahn, and I'm actually going to put him under Liu Kang / on par with Cassie. He is a true victim of writing. You see, in MK9, Shao Kahn was a formidable force. No one could stop him, and the only individual that could was seemingly Liu Kang and a god-powered Raiden. So he was a formidable force in MK9, which is where he does derive from. However, in 11, as mean as this might sound, he's definitely a bit of a pushover in comparison, as he is defeated by the likes of KOTOR and Katana. Now why, oh why is this the case? Well, unfortunately the reason is very simple. Shao Kahn isn't the big bad of this game. That is unfortunately the main reason as to why he loses these fights. He's not the big bad and he isn't the main antagonist, and as such, because of that, he does suffer from it. Now in saying that, a lot of his scenes are memorable, and he is a fantastic villain in the series, and does absolutely have god-killing potential, but this version of Shao Kahn is definitely a step down and a nerfed version of what we saw in MK9. So for the time being, I will put him at the lower end of A, but he can actually slip into B due to just how he has unfortunately been written. Now we're on to our final character, because this video, it's really long, I'm gonna hate editing it. That is none other than Fire God Liu Kang, and this one should be obvious. He's at the very peak of the S tier list. Let me move him. Go there. But yes, no, this one should be very obvious. Liu Kang was already one of the strongest characters in the universe. So when you fuse MK9 Liu Kang with Revenant Liu Kang with Raiden, then you get a being that can contend with a titan and even surpass their power. Despite the fact that fusion has never existed in MK before this, it's still a pretty cool outcome for a character that many have wanted to see be put back in the limelight again. And honestly, this is definitely a way of putting eyes back on it. Now Liu Kang himself is pretty much unstoppable, with the only character that can get the edge over him being Raiden. So when Raiden is eliminated from the equation and infused with Liu Kang, you get a deity that pretty much no one can stop. He pretty much wields the power of a Elder God and pretty much defeats 3 empowered Elder God champions, as well as an Elder God, as well as a Titan itself, and becomes the keeper of the Hourglass. Fire God Liu Kang has entered a level of power that no one has seen before. So really, until we actually see more, we can only imagine that his power is somewhat limitless, especially with the Hourglass of Time at his fingertips. And with him rewriting time, the Mortal Kombat universe could do with his amazing power, as it strongly insinuated that more Titans are on the horizon. But until Mortal Kombat 12, we can only wait and presume. But yes guys, that basically is it for this tier list. I hope you enjoyed it. I apologize for this for being so long. I've been planning this for the last 2 weeks and writing out a script for it, but I did not expect it to be this long. So I do apologize in advance, and I thank you all for watching till the very end here. It's a lot of sputtering, my voice is partially gone because of this, but I hope you enjoy it nonetheless. I've really been wanting to actually make this video for a while now, but I knew how ambitious it was as a project. And plus, if I was going to give you a Mortal Kombat 11 lore tier list, I wanted to make sure that I did it right. And hopefully you've all been able to enjoy it. Because as I mentioned, this was a project that I really wanted to work on. Now, like I mentioned at the very beginning of the video, this is not at all a definitive tier list. This is me using my overall understanding of the knowledge and the lore, as well as the material they has given us from MK9, as well as MK11. So really, I wanted to use the information we had there to construct a tier list and arrange them according to their power level. And if you disagree, guess what? That's perfectly fine, because I'm going to be linking this tier list in the description below so you can make your own. But yes guys, that's basically it for this video. Now if you really enjoyed this, I wouldn't actually mind making one of these in the future. Maybe on the MK9 story mode, maybe X story mode, but again, I want you guys' reception. And don't worry, it won't be as long as this one. The only reason this one took as long as it did is because I covered every single version of every character in this bloody game. Oh my god, I'm gonna hate editing this. But if you enjoy it, that is what truly matters. But yeah guys, that's actually it for now. So before this video wraps up, if possible, let's try getting it to about 500 likes. It's honestly a great way of supporting this channel. And also do not forget to tick that bell, as it will notify you when I do upload a video. So as always, please comment, like, subscribe, and share this video with everyone you know. Please take care, and I will see you all next time.
Hello darkness, my old friend.